What we do on a daily basis is we patrol and care for the protected area, because the Montego Bay Marine Park is actually a protected area. We manage two protected areas, the airport fish sanctuary and also the Bogue lagoons. So we monitor those and ensure that no fishing within the no restricted zones. We also have a very active education program in which we go into schools. I mean, pre-COVID, we used to be up and about in schools and communities, educating them about the environment and best practices. And then we also have the scientific department in which we monitor the water system and whatever is going on in our environment. So that's really the core of what the Montego Bay Marine Park is about.
So you today or tomorrow or whenever in the future, make sure you take up a plastic bottle if you come on the beach or anywhere you go.
Please remember to use up those recycle bins. Try to build up that plastic bag with plastic bottles and try to recycle it.
I encourage all persons within the island to do their best, play their part, and ensure that their shorelines are kept clean, not only the beaches but the rivers and communities as well. After all, it's our environment, Jamaica, and we should take care of it.
An average 400 years for plastic bottles to decompose. That's not in our lifetime. So most likely our grandparents' plastic is somewhere in the environment, right? So if we can do something about that right now, even a micro effort is so very important for a mega effective stake on the environment. So do your part, remove the plastic today so it doesn't linger on for generations to come and end up in the ocean, killing marine life and even ending up back on our plate. Because when the plastic don't break down immediately, they might break into what we call microplastic, and fish and the filter feeders such as our shrimp and lobsters might consume those, and eventually we are the one consuming those marine animals, and then we get sick or we ended up eating plastics.
Children are the future, and ensuring our future is healthy requires that children are always provided with nutritious foods to grow well and live long. Unhealthy diets high in sugar, salt, and fat consumed by children may make them obese and prone to non-communicable diseases later in life. Healthy foods and beverages not only help them learn better, but also protects them from non-communicable diseases such as some cancers, diabetes, hypertension, and cardiovascular diseases in their childhood and adult life. So, whether it's at home, in the lunch bag, or at school, let's make healthy foods and beverages for our children the only rule.
What does moving to green energy mean for us? Find out during the September edition of the Caribbean Economic Forum. My name is Tony Thorin, and I'm your host, who will be happily joined by some climate experts, Naika Prescott, Raquel Moses, and Dr. Gary Jackson, as we assess the importance of the energy transition, the value of sustainability and its effect on the resilience of our economies, societies, and the environment.
Morning.
What does moving to green energy mean for us? Find out during the September edition of the Caribbean Economic Forum. My name is Tony Thorin, and I'm your host, who will be happily joined by some climate experts, Naika Prescott, Raquel Moses, and Dr. Gary Jackson as we assess the importance of the energy transition, the value of sustainability and its effect on the resilience of our economies, societies, and the environment.
Introducing the new
in today's capacity transport, who will be giving us an update on the efforts at rolling out our new JUTC buses, as well as successful attempts to a great extent, of easing the plight of commuters in this back-to-school period in the transportation sector. We'll also have a presentation from the Minister of Education and Youth, who will also be giving us a report on the systems, processes, and actions of the Ministry of Education and Youth as it relates to the back-to-school period. That is the Honorable Favour Williams. Before I go, though, I think it's important that the government makes a statement as it relates to recent incidents of attacks on the free press. This government has been one of the most transparent and open. As you can see, this morning we're having a post-cabinet press briefing where we allow ourselves to be questioned by members of the media on a weekly basis about the actions of the government. We've taken a policy position that we need to be as open as possible, as the press is important for the maintenance of our democracy. It then follows that no politician or government member should be antagonistic, aggressive, disrespectful, or threatening to members of the media. Where it has happened, we have taken action on our side to protect the integrity and the freedom of the press. Jamaica has a long tradition of the free press, which has benefited our society greatly. We wholeheartedly condemn any attempts to intimidate, threaten members of the media, to prevent them from doing their work. These threats not only put the lives of Jamaican citizens at risk, but has a chilling effect in allowing the media to do their work. We state clearly, our government believes in the free press, and we will do everything in our power to protect press freedom. We're also concerned, finally, that these incidents, which are well chronicled, may have a negative impact on our global press freedom ranking. We have done well over the past decade in consistently improving our press freedom ranking, and we will continue to do that. But we're afraid that these incidents have now caused the international community to look at Jamaica in a different way as a country that may not fully respect the freedom of the press. We want to assure them that that is not so. The people of Jamaica, the government of Jamaica, respects and wishes to protect the freedom of the press. Thank you very much. I'll now welcome the Honourable Minister Darrell Vaz, who will make a presentation on the transport sector. Minister.
Thank you very much. Good morning, colleague Minister Favour Williams, members of the media, and of course, all those who are joining us for this post-cabinet press briefing. You'll recall I was here last week, just prior to the rollout of back to school, and I'm back again this morning because I believe in full disclosure. I believe in accountability and transparency, and that goes for whether it is good news or bad news. You'll recall that I had projected for a rollout of 300 buses the week prior to back to school, September 4th. And on Monday, you'd have seen where I released the data, which I think it's the first time any minister is actually releasing the full data in relation to the rollout. And for that day, on Monday, we had 285 buses available. And after rollout, we ended up with 236 buses. And that was due to defects and breakdowns, both in terms of fare machines for the buses and also, obviously, other mechanical defects. Yesterday, we had a rollout of 233 buses. And this morning, up to 7 o'clock, we had 265 available buses. And for 7 o'clock, we had 70 from the Portmore depot, 65 from the Spanish Town depot, and 60 from the Rockfort depot. Bearing in mind that all the buses are not rolled out at once. It's done in phases over the period of the morning. So that was up to 7 o'clock this morning. For Portmore, we estimate transporting 1,000. So I would say that based on the reports that I've gotten and the feedback that I've gotten from commuters and others, that so far we have made a big improvement in this year's back to school. But there is much more improvement that can and will be done. The challenge that we're having right now, why we're not meeting the target of the 300 buses, is that we have 70 buses that are aged between 12 and 14 years old. Those buses were rehabilitated for the back to school. And unfortunately, they are not standing up or holding up as we expected. So the rehabilitated buses are the ones that are coming back in pretty much as soon as they go out. So the decision in relation to that, based on the age, is that we're going to try and make 30 or 35 buses out of the 70 buses that can be reliable for the interim until obviously such time as we are able to refleet. So I continue to ask for patience and understanding. This is a decade-long problem, possibly 20 years. And obviously, today we are seeing the effects of the lack of investment. I want to speak to the future, but before I do that, I just want to rubbish the claims that I'm hearing purported to come from the opposition spokesperson on transport. The claim that I'm hearing is that we are under-reporting the rollout of the buses and that it's really only 180 buses that are actually out there being rolled out. So if you do a simple mathematical calculation, if we had 140 buses that was agreed at our lowest a few months ago that we were rolling out, and we got 50 new buses, that would take it to 190 buses. And that's without the rehabilitated buses and other buses that required spare parts, etc. So I want to caution and ask, as I have said before, to leave the politics out of the transport sector. We have enough issues that we are trying to deal with, And what we are trying to do is have collaboration, consensus, and communication. So let me just quickly move to where we are going. You'll recall that the Minister of Finance, in his budget presentation a few months ago, had made a commitment for 200 buses, starting 100 next year, 24-25, and 100 25-26. I've subsequently met with the minister and his team, along with my permanent secretary and our team, to go through the realities of the JUTC. And I'm confident that in a matter of weeks, we will be in a position to state categorically how we have revised these figures, what the new figures are, and the timelines for the arrival of new buses. It would be, shall I say, it would be premature for me to go into much more detail, but to say categorically that as minister, I'm confident that the commuters and the public at large will be hearing some very good news in relation to the refleeting of the JUTC. But ladies and gentlemen, refleeting can't be done business as usual. We have two major problems at the JUTC. One is the leakage of diesel oil, as almost all of the fleet uses diesel. And secondly, obviously, fare collection. So you know it's a policy of the government stated that we are moving away from diesel fuel. And we have started to integrate both CNG, compressed natural gas, which is LNG, which there is a depot in Portmore as we speak that can hold up to 150 buses, and obviously electric, for which the government has imported 5 electric buses that are going to be tested, and one is here already, makes 6, and I'm sure there are others to come. These buses that we are speaking about, whether it be 200 or 300 or 500 over the next 3 to 5 years, will be CNG buses and electric buses. More CNG for the immediate and electric for the medium term. Once that is integrated into the fleet, you will retire a significant amount of the existing fleet, which, as I said before, uses diesel oil. And once that is done, that will take care of the leakage. And it's not leakage from the bus. It's not the tank that's leaking. It is that the diesel oil is being rerouted to other areas outside of the JUTC. And secondly, there is a pilot project that is starting anytime now for JUTC to go cashless. We are expecting that by August next year, we should be in a position for the pilot project to have ended and for the procurement process to have ended in order for us to go cashless. I don't need to emphasize the hundreds of millions of dollars that JUTC is losing annually as a result of the pilferage of the diesel oil and, of course, the uncollected fares by the JUTC. Once that is done, obviously, the burden on the Ministry of Finance, the Consolidated Fund, and the taxpayers of Jamaica will be radically reduced because, as you know, JUTC subsidizes billions of dollars a year. And a lot of those billions are as a result of the two issues that I just spoke about. So I'm looking forward to coming back here after conclusion of negotiations with the Ministry of Finance, who have been very receptive, because the fact of the matter is that there's no orderly, prosperous society that can be that way without a good public transportation system. And this government is fully 100% committed to that. So again, I commit out of full disclosure to keep the public updated and thank the traveling public for their patience. And I can tell you that I have seen and heard of the improvements in the waiting time for buses, especially for the Spanish Town and Portmore routes, which at one point was up to 2.5 to 3 hours, which is totally unacceptable in modern day Jamaica. So you have my commitment that I will keep the country updated, and I ask for feedback through whichever mediums that you can. If there's any issues that you think need to be addressed, I'll be more than happy to receive them and to see how best I can treat them in relation to making the commuting public more satisfied. I will be going to the Halfway Tree Center for Monday morning, which is really the full rollout of back to school, to see for myself firsthand what's happening, and also you can expect improvements in the facility at the Halfway Tree Transport Center, along with other transport centers in and around Jamaica. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think you escaped the platform a bit early, as we would love to have you respond to a few questions that the media may wish to ask.
Any questions? Sure.
Good morning. My name is Shallow. I am from Nationwide News. Just want to ask, how are the plans coming along for the rural bus system?
So I have a draft document that has been prepared and put forward by the Transport Authority. I will be having discussions on that this week. Obviously, we need the input of the ministry itself, but it is something that is high on the agenda, and as I had promised, that I would want to have something before, in terms of some kind of pilot project, by the end of the year. I can also tell you that I have received, I have not read, but I have received in my absence from office yesterday, the steering committee's report on the fare increases, which will be discussed internally and of course taken to cabinet in short order once we review. So again, just to let you know that the issues that confront the transport sector, and have done so for many years, if not decades, are being dealt with assiduously. And the fact of the matter, whether it is good news or bad news, depending on what side of the transport sector you sit on, we are going to deal with them in an upfront manner, transparent, and of course make sure as best as possible that there is consensus. But as I said before, this is not about a fare increase alone. This has to be tied to better service in the transportation industry. So you will hear more about that, but as I said before, we are committed as a government to deal and confront all the issues with a view of making sure at the end of the day that the traveling public are the beneficiaries of an improved transportation system.
It's about how the economy.
In terms of the latest incident where someone unfortunately vandalized one of the new JUTC buses, are there any plans being considered to help curb some?
So I got an interesting WhatsApp last night where this person was telling me what obtains in other jurisdictions, specifically the United States of America. And damage to public property is a felony. It actually carries federal charges. In Jamaica, we have it as a stone throwing incident. We cannot spend this amount of money to have either idle or orchestrated attacks on the government's property, because the government's property is the taxpayers' property. So that is something that I'm going to be looking at in relation to current legislation and whether or not it requires amended legislation, because the time is now for this to stop. It cannot be that we waited so long for 50 brand new buses and within the first day of operations there's an attack. Thankfully no one was injured, but it is unacceptable and it cannot continue to be classified as a stone throwing incident. It's not. It's an attack on government property, and it will be dealt with in that manner going forward.
But
Thank you.
You should also mention, Minister, that there are vested interests who are not happy with the expansion
that's
of the
that's why I said
fleet.
orchestrated or idle.
Right.
That's why I classified it in two classifications, idle or orchestrated. And the fact of the matter is that, as I said before, I am making an appeal again. Any improvement in the transport, whether it is the bus system or the taxi system, is to the benefit of the citizens of Jamaica. And therefore, it must be embraced by all well-thinking Jamaicans and leave the bad mind behind.
Thank you very much, Minister. Did you have a question for him? Minister.
I'm sorry, Minister, as you go back, I just have a couple from some members of the media online who are not physically here. Mr. Keys, the business reporter from the RJR Gleaner Group, I think it's TVJ, beg your pardon. Minister Vaz, Mr. Keys is trying to find out, the JUTC fleet seems to have a number of different brands, the VDLs from Europe, Golden Dragons and others. This moves away from the original build-out of the fleet management approach. So he has about 4 questions. Let me start with the first 2. Was it a deliberate move to have various brands in the fleet? And what's the rationale there?
So it's always good to standardize any fleet, any large fleet. Unfortunately for us as government, we have certain procurement guidelines which allow for participation and for it to be evaluated based on various different criterias, one of which is price, et cetera, et cetera. So in relation to that, it's kind of difficult because obviously it's who comes out in the tender. It is the best
What does moving to green energy mean for us? Find out during the September edition of the Caribbean Economic Forum. My name is Tony Thorne, and I'm your host, who will be happily joined by some climate experts, Naika Prescott, Raquel Moses, and Dr. Gary Jackson, as we assess the importance of the energy transition, the value of sustainability and its effect on the resilience of our economies, societies, and the environment.
People always say government must be held accountable. But is whose job to keep government accountable? And what that really mean? Well, you see, when ministers and public officials have to provide answers for decisions made and can face consequences for those actions and decisions, that means they're being held accountable. Keeping government accountable is a key responsibility of our elected representatives, and the Parliament provides special tools or mechanisms just for this. As citizens, we need to understand how they work so we can play our part to ensure that the members of Parliament we elect are using the tools and doing their job well. Here are 4 of the primary tools you should understand and talk to your MP about. Tool number 1, Ministers' Statements. To effectively monitor the government, MPs need to stay informed. Every Tuesday when Parliament sits, different cabinet ministers are scheduled to give an update on decisions they're making on our behalf. These updates are called Statements by Ministers. They cover a wide range of national issues that other MPs, media, and citizens may have questions about and wish to examine further. That brings us to tool number 2. What you do when you want information? You ask questions, and that's why we have question time. Both opposition and government MPs can submit questions to the Prime Minister or Cabinet Ministers for details on, for example, how a contract was awarded or expenditure to purchase tablets for schools. So if you ever have a question for a government minister, try asking through your MP. After all, that's why they're your political representatives. They should represent your questions and concerns to the government. Tool number 3, Parliamentary Debates. When cabinet ministers present the government's proposals for new policies, laws, and programs, parliamentary debates allow both opposition and government MPs to air concerns, make suggestions, and endorse proposals. If you ever watch those debates, you know they can get a little fiery. But the debate is important, as it informs decisions and continues until a vote is taken on the way forward. Then we have tool number 4, Parliamentary Committees. The general sittings of Parliament are not always sufficient for detailed examination of government work, so oversight committees are formed using government and opposition members to do just that. Some committees like the PAC and the PAAC are in place for an entire parliamentary term. Their job is to monitor the use of public funds to find ways to increase value and efficiency while reducing waste and corruption. Cabinet and state ministers are not appointed to oversight committees since they are a part of the government. Some committees are formed when a need arises. For example, joint select committees are formed to review draft policies or legislation or to probe other matters of serious national importance. Members of these committees are both opposition and government MPs and senators, and these committees will usually invite citizens to share their opinions, concerns, and recommendations. So there you have it, 4 accountability tools of Parliament that are used to make sure government run right. Visit jamja.org to find contact information for your MP. Invite them to meet with the community so they can better represent your issues and concerns in Parliament and keep government accountable. Get involved and let's make Jamaica land we love, Jamaica land we own, and Jamaica land we run well. A message from the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, funded by the European Union and the Inter-American Development Bank in partnership with the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica.
That you are scrapping that $200 million revolving loan, or that will be in addition to the trade?
So that will have to be relooked at to see how we can do it where it is achievable and attainable by those who want to access it. But as I said before, based on the criteria, it just was not. It didn't get off the ground for the operators. But again, the steering committee, that's part of their mandate and remit to relook at all of these things and see how and what we can do in relation to improving and giving access to finance for the sector. Thanks.
Remember also that there was a 30% discount as one of the announcements made in March this year on the renewal of PPP license.
Yes.
It was a significant sum.
Yes.
That benefited public transportation.
Which they are very appreciative of.
Thank you very much, Minister Vaz. We will now ask Minister the Honorable Favor Williams. Before she comes, though, I would like to welcome Dr. Maureen Dwyer, who is Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education and Youth, and also Dr. Kassan Troop, Acting Chief Education Officer in the Ministry of Education and Youth as well. Minister Williams?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Let me acknowledge my colleague ministers, Minister Vaz, Minister Morgan, I acknowledge as well Permanent Secretary Acting Dr. Dwyer, Dr. Troop, Chief Education Officer Acting as well, all the team members from the Ministry of Education and Youth, members of the media. This morning, I am pleased to share with you highlights from the results of the secondary level external examinations sat in May, June of this year and administered through the offices of the Overseas Examination Commission. We'll also share results of the City and Guilds. But before I go into that, I just want to again say to all of our students and our teachers, our parents, happy back to school based on the checks that we have done in terms of the start of the school year. It seems to have been going smoothly. Yes, we know that not all our students are back yet, or our teachers are back in the classroom, because traditionally it's our primary schools that tend to come back more fully, even though now we're seeing some of our private schools, some of our primary schools stagger the students coming back, meaning they will bring back the grade 6 cohort, like we saw at Windward Road Primary School. But we are seeing students come back, and more students as the days go by. Traditionally, in our high schools, they have also staggered, simply because their orientation sessions tend to be more intensive with students and parents. But we fully expect that as we go through the week and into next week, that we will see the full cadre of students and the teachers back in the classrooms. And so let me start, and I have a few charts that I will show. So let me start with the Caribbean Secondary Education Certificate, the CSEC exam results. And if you go to the next chart, I want to start by just looking at the grade 11 cohort, looking at males versus female. You can barely see the difference in terms of the blue versus the red, and what that tells you is that there is almost an equal number of females versus males. If you look at the total, what you should take away from this chart is that where we are in 2023, we have, we're slightly higher than where we were in 2019. And we've chosen to give this 5-year look at the CSEC exam because it's a perfect time to take a look at pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, to see where we were rather than just comparing with last year. I think this 5-year look will give you a better perspective on where we are exactly. So if we go to the next chart, we look at registration by sex. You will see that where we are overall, we are better in 2023 than where we were in 2019 post-pandemic in terms of the number of students registering for the CSEC. And that is a very good trend. It's particularly evident this year versus last year. But the better comparison as well is to look at where we are now versus where we were before the pandemic. Obviously, you see the dip, but we're seeing the recovery, and for that we are very thankful. If you move to the next chart, again, it's the same pattern. The next one, the number of students Next chart, please. The next one. Number of students passing grades 1 to 3, meaning students getting a grade 1 to 3. Again, the good news is, if you look at the overall numbers, we are almost just a smidgen under where we were post-pandemic. And you're also seeing the decline into the pandemic, but you're seeing the recovery out of the pandemic in terms of the number of students passing with a grades 1 to 3. And we'll move to the next slide. Looking now at CSEC passes in English, maths, and info technology. The gray one is info technology. It's been pretty much a good performance in information technology, not a lot of decline, slight recovery this year versus last. If you look at mathematics, you could see that we declined into the pandemic, but there is good recovery out of it if you look at this year versus last year. Moving to figure 6, the percentage of students who passed at least one subject. Again, significant decline into the pandemic, but we're seeing a sharp recovery this year versus last. And if you look closely at the numbers, where we are relative to last year, we're at about 84% this year, relative to maybe 86 plus % in 2019. So it's only a difference of about 2 points. So again, we're happy for the recovery that we're seeing as we move forward. I'll switch now to CAPE. Looking at CAPE, the first slide shows the candidate entries, and we are seeing recovery there, 23 versus 22, but we're not back yet where we were pre-pandemic. If you move to the next slide, looking at the public subject entries, again, the same pattern, recovery, but not quite back yet to where we were pre the pandemic. Subject performance, which would be the next one, pattern is similar. So the takeaway from what we're presenting today is that there is recovery, 23 versus 22. In a lot of areas, we are back where we were prior to the pandemic, but in some we still have some recovery to go. I could give you greater details in terms of what I have here for CAPE, but I believe that these slides tell the story that we would like the Jamaican public to know, and it's that whether you look at CSEC or CAPE, we're seeing the better results relative to last year, which we applaud. We know that these students lived through the pandemic. They were in the virtual world quite a bit. They are the students of resilience, and we want to honor them for their diligence, for the work that they put in to be at this point in their educational journey. In terms of City and Guilds, as you know, the City and Guilds exams are offered at 3 stages, stages 1, 2, and 3, with stage 3 recognized as the acceptable matriculation for post-secondary programs in Jamaica. And in the 2023 sitting, we had, there were 32,532 candidates registered for the exam, some 34,294 who were registered sat Maths and English. And while we saw high passes in terms of English, we still have some work to do in terms of mathematics. We want to note the students who are in the Sixth Form Pathways program who sat mathematics, 2,512 of them sat. These are the students who would have otherwise graduated from grade 11, but they chose to go on to grade 12. And here we are today with many more of them with mathematics in their personal portfolio, and that's something we should celebrate as well. And so I want to end there and allow any questions.
Thank you very much, Minister. We will now open the floor to questions from members of the media. Do we have any questions?
Let me say, Minister, I know there are a lot of numbers,
right,
and we will make the numbers available to you, because as you do your write-ups, your stories, you'll need the numbers. But to stand here and repeat all of them wouldn't be,
okay.
wouldn't be good.
We have a question.
Yes, Minister, this is in relation to an issue that came up last year in terms of the politicization of school boards. You had said to me in an interview that you will be looking into the matter. Where are we on that?
When you say the politicization of school boards, what exactly do you mean?
Political affiliates being placed on school boards.
I don't understand.
You know,
is it that persons who are associated with
political affiliates?
So meaning like voters?
Pardon?
I don't understand. What do you mean affiliates?
Supporters of the PMP, supporters of the JLP being placed on school boards.
So if you're a supporter of a political party, you should not be on a school board?
Activist. Minister.
I don't understand. I mean, as a citizen of Jamaica...
Sorry, can you... The
no, I wish to answer.
No, but she understands.
I'm the Minister of Information. I wish to answer. I am saying the idea that as the Constitution gives us all freedom of association, meaning that we are allowed to associate with whichever political organization, which whether JLP or PNP, should not preclude us from serving our country. While there are questions in some cases of political activism on boards, having persons who are associated with political associations should not preclude them. If your reasoning is that school boards should not be the place to practice partisan politics, that's a very reasonable and fair argument. But to frame it that persons who are supporters of either political party being on school board is problematic, actually could become a violation of people's rights. Okay. Do you have another question?
Could I? Yeah, well, just let me just add to it to say that governance is one of the significant pillars of the Jamaica Transformation Education Commission report. In fact, if you go through that report, it is the very first, pillar, and that means our school boards. We have 1,010 schools across Jamaica, and each of them has a board. The boards are selected through a combination of persons, including the Member of Parliament. I've spent, since I've been at the Ministry of Education and Youth, a significant number of hours working with the National Council on Education, the entity responsible for choosing boards, and working with our Members of Parliament and others to ensure that our boards are appointed on time, and that we deal with this age-old problem of signatories on boards as boards transition. So that's the focus that we've had. We've had a number of sensitization sessions with all the MPs to, update them on the act that guides the boards and to answer any questions that they may have. To date, based on my observation, that process has been working well. I have had very few, if any, situation that I would consider to be political in nature. We continue to streamline our board selections, and where issues come to my attention, we act promptly, either to replace the particular board member or the chairman, or whatever the situation is. We act on it because, again, we know how significant boards are to our schools. I know I'd indicated in the past that we will be looking at the model that the Minister of Finance and the Public Service has rolled out for statutory boards. We are not there yet because at the same time, I know we are just getting used to that model of selecting boards in terms of having a database and having names there and so on. So it's very much still alive and well. And what I can say to you is it will not fall off the agenda because governance is a significant pillar of the transformation of education.
Ministers, if you could indulge me, again, Mr. Keys is trying to get a business almost slant to what you've presented, and he's asked a few questions, though not here. He's asking, Minister, what would you say accounted for the increase in candidates, and are you able to say what percentage of this year's candidates were doing resits?
We're doing what?
Resits. We're taking the exam again for the second or third time.
I don't have that number in terms of resits. I don't believe it's a high number, though. I won't hazard a guess, but I can find that out. But I don't believe it's a large number at all. Remember that in terms of the increase in the numbers, I indicated that we've seen more of our grade 12 students who opted for the Sixth Form Pathways program. Here, they have a great chance to sit an exam that they, would not have otherwise done, and they've been successful. So those are in the numbers as well.
He has two more for you, Minister. Is the ministry still tracking the learning loss from COVID-19? And if you have continued to, what is the assessment saying? And again, I'm doing what I tell the reporters not to do. I'm asking 2 or 3 questions, but indulge him for a minute, Minister. And the Patterson report, he wants to find out when a comprehensive ranking of schools would take place as well.
All right, in terms of the first question, I thought my charts fully demonstrated where we are. We could see the loss as demonstrated by the exams going through, and we're seeing the recovery of that. We have the numbers that go along with the chart, but just the general pattern that we have observed is as represented by the exams is a recovery, and a recovery in the learning loss, because if there wasn't, you would see it reflected in the exams. And as it relates to the ranking of schools, you're talking about the what was in the Patterson report. I'm going to ask our permanent secretary because she understands she's from the National Education Inspectorate, where they've been observing and assessing schools for some time now, and she could best speak to you about the value-added ranking that was talked about in the report.
Minister, stay over the side.
while Dr. Dwyer approaches the lectern, we can also make the slides and the presentation you just did available to members of the media.
Yes.
And certainly put those graphics on our social media pages as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. Ranking is really not something that, as a ministry, we relish. We've never ranked. In fact, as an NEI, what we have done is to place schools in categories according to the support that they will need for improvement. So it's a more developmental approach. I know the Pattison report speaks to value adding and value added. So we currently operate a value added model. But I think the value added model that the report refers to is one where we would rank according to how schools are performing on certain criteria. We are moving towards doing what we call a VAMAS. And this is where we're looking at not just academic performance, but the extent to which the social and personal development of our students is being improved by the schooling experience. So we are on track with that. It is a little more difficult to implement because of the standardization of data, which we need across the system. But that is in place and rolling. But in terms of a blatant ranking of schools, 1, 2, 3, it is not the ministry's way, not at this time. Is that helpful? Sure.
Thank you, PS. I believe those are the questions we have from the floor with members of the media. Minister Morgan. Oh, we have another from Ms. Francis.
Thank you, Naomi.
Minister Morgan, this is for you. Why did Jamaica not bid on the cricket World Cup, the T20 World Cup?
We didn't bid. There was a bid.
Yes.
I was nowhere. Where was that?
Surely it was discussed at cabinet.
Well, I think that the Minister of Culture would be the best person to answer. When is Cricket World Cup?
2024.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll definitely ask the Minister of Culture to give an update. I really didn't realize that there was a bid happening now.
Yes, and I'm asking because there have been several questions to which the media have not been getting any answer.
I'm really sorry that that is happening. But definitely I'll ask Minister Grange, who's usually very responsive, to respond as to why we didn't bid on it. Is there any other question? Sure.
We received reports on Monday that some parents were still protesting at Seaforth High School. And I remember you saying that you would have had a conversation with the National Security Minister to enhance security at the school. So I'm just asking, was that successful and are classes being held now?
Right. So on Monday, there was absolutely police presence at the school. As far as the reports that I've gotten, school happened. It started smoothly and was in session. Obviously, as we go through the week, I'll get an update. But as far as we know, school is happening.
All right. Thank you. That's it. And I think I want to end on a positive note. I want to refer Kimon to our Constitution. I think it's Section 24. And I think the reason why sometimes there may be suggestions which seem to be, not by you, but by others, that seem to be very idealistic, but then they run counter to our constitutional arrangements. The idea of the mere association with a political organization precluding someone from being on a board is actually runs counter to our constitutional arrangements. In our approach with Dr. Nigel Clark, what we have said is that ministers, senators, and councillors who are actually elected officials and senators cannot sit on government boards, right? But we could never say that someone who necessarily goes to the JLP or the PNP conference in a green shirt can be excluded because they are expressing a right that is outlined in our Constitution. So in the question, political affiliation on boards, maybe what we should be contemplating is whether, as the Minister said, we should look at whether political representatives, if we need to start looking at that. And I think that's, I'm not making a policy statement, I'm just exploring the idea based on the question that you have asked. But a general exclusion of persons who are affiliated with a PNP, JLP, or UIC or whatever would breach their constitutional rights. But I want to thank everyone for being here this morning. It's been a wonderful post-cabinet press briefing. I want to also thank my co-host of post-cab on a weekly basis, the Honorable Val Williams. I really appreciate you taking the time.
There's a lot to be told.
Education is very important, yes. And I really want to thank our colleagues here at the Ministry of Education, Dr. Maureen Dwyer, Acting Permanent Secretary, as well as Dr. Kassan Troop, as well as members of the media, OPM, and PBCJ and JIS, who consistently every week come out very early to ensure that we are always on time and we're always consistent. And to you, our viewers and listeners, thank you very much for tuning in to our post-cabinet press briefing. See you next week, 8 o'clock on Wednesday. Thank you very much.
Looking to roll out about 315 buses for the back-to-school September morning, which include these 50 buses. All of those will be ready for rollout. What this will allow us to do is get the new buses in and take some of the older buses out to repair them. In this shipment, you have 5 electric buses, 45-seater, and you have 5 buses that will carry 34 passengers because they are facilitating disabled